Dominique Carter Reyes was 34 years old when her mother-in-law looked her dead in the eye in front of the entire family and called her a placeholder wife. Patricia smiled while she said it. Sabrina, sitting close enough to Julian to matter, smiled too. Julian said nothing. He stared at his plate while his mother dismantled his wife piece by piece, her career, her age, her worth, and didn't say a single word in her defense. What none of them knew was that the building they were sitting 2 blocks from, the one housing Patricia's precious social club, already belonged to Dominique. Had for years, under a name none of them had ever bothered to learn. They thought she had nothing, a modest condo, a consulting job, a husband who'd already started moving money to someone else. Dominique finished her wine, thanked Patricia for dinner, and smiled the smile of a woman who already knew exactly how this ends. They had no idea who they'd just humiliated. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today, and if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The earrings were simple, small gold hoops, barely noticeable. Dom held one up to the light anyway, turning it slowly between her fingers, the way she always did when she was thinking. The bedroom mirror showed her everything at once. Her dark brown skin, smooth and unbothered. The neat wrap dress she'd chosen, deep burgundy, understated, nothing flashy, nothing that would give Patricia Reyes anything extra to comment on. 4 years of dinners at that woman's table had taught Dom one thing: don't hand her ammunition. She pressed the earring through and reached for the second one. "You almost ready?" Julian called from the hallway. 2 minutes! She heard him pace, back and forth just outside the bedroom door. That was new. Julian didn't pace. Julian was the kind of man who moves slow and easy through a room, hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed, like nothing in the world was ever really urgent. He'd been like that the whole 4 years she'd known him. Calm on the surface, almost too calm. The kind of calm that felt comfortable until it started to feel like avoidance. But lately, he paced. Dom set down the earring case and studied her reflection for a moment. Not out of vanity, out of habit. She was the kind of woman who liked to know exactly what other people were looking at before they looked. She looked fine. She looked composed. That would have to be enough. Julie Lading was by the front door when she came out, phone face down against his thigh. He flipped it over the second he saw her. The screen went dark. He smiled. "You look good," he said. "Thank you." She picked up her bag from the console table. "You ready?" Yeah, let's go." He held the door open. She walked through it. In the car, he was quiet for the first few minutes. The city slid past the windows, amber streetlights, corner stores with their signs still lit, a woman walking a dog that was way too big for the leash she was holding. Dom watched it all and let the silence sit. Then Julian said, "Mom's really looking forward to tonight." Dom nodded. "She say who's coming?" "Just family, I think." He checked his mirrors. "Maybe a couple people." Maybe a couple people. 4 years, and she still noticed how he did that. Kept things just vague enough that she couldn't ask a direct question. She'd learned to notice the shape of what he didn't say. "What about the meeting?" she asked. His hands shifted on the wheel. "What meeting?" "The family meeting, the one you said you'd tell me about 2 weeks ago." "It's nothing serious." He glanced over. "Just some family stuff, financial stuff. I'll explain it after." After. Always after. She looked out the window again. His phone buzzed in the cup holder. He grabbed it fast, faster than he needed to. She caught the name on the screen before he turned it over. Sabrina. He didn't mention it. She didn't ask. She filed it away the way she filed most things, quietly, in a place where it would keep. "Oh," he said, too casual, a beat too late. "I should mention, Sabrina from work might stop by. Mom invited her. They've been talking lately, I guess." "Sabrina Holt?" "Yeah, you've heard me mention her." "Once or twice." He nodded, like that settled something. She let it go. Patricia's house was in a quiet part of the suburb, behind a row of old oak trees that made the street look more expensive than it was. The lights inside were all on. 2 cars already sat in the driveway. Julian parked and was out of the car before Dom had fully unbuckled. She took her time, smoothed her dress, breathed once, slow and even. Patricia was already at the door. "Julian!" She pulled him into a long hug, both hands on his back, rocking slightly like he'd been away at sea. "Come in, come in! Gerald just opened the wine." She stepped back. Her eyes moved to Dom, cool and quick, the way you'd glance at a piece of furniture you were deciding whether to rearrange. "Dominique," she smiled with her mouth. "Glad you could make it." "Thank you for having me, Patricia." They didn't hug. They never hugged. Inside, the house smelled like roasted garlic and something floral, probably the candles Patricia lined along the console in the entryway. The dining table was already set. Good china, multiple forks. Patricia never used the good china for just family. Gerald appeared from the kitchen, glass in hand, and gave Dom a nod that was almost apologetic. She'd always thought Gerald looked like a man who knew more than he let on, and had made his peace with that a long time ago. And then there was the woman standing near the fireplace, wineglass in hand, wearing a pale cream blouse and a careful smile. "This is Sabrina," Patricia said, touching the woman's arm like she'd known her for years. "A dear family friend." Sabrina was young, 20-something, pretty in a practiced way, like she'd spent time figuring out what her best angles were. "Nice to meet you," Dom said. "You too." Sabrina's smile stayed perfectly in place. Patricia gestured toward the table. "Let's all sit. The food's ready." Dom found her seat, not at the center of the table, not beside Julian, at the far end, the seat closest to the kitchen door, away from everything. She sat down, unfolded her napkin, and placed it across her lap. The meal began. The soup came out first, a pale butternut squash, garnished with a swirl of cream and a single sprig of thyme. Patricia's cooking was always beautiful. Dom would give her that. For a few minutes, the table stayed easy. Gerald asked Julian about a project at work. One of the cousins, Marcus, who Dom had met twice, talked about a car he was thinking of buying. Patricia refilled glasses and smiled and played the gracious host the way she always did in the first act of these dinners. Dom ate her soup and listened. She had learned over 4 years that Patricia always started soft. It was around the time the salad came out that the conversation turned. Not sharply. Patricia didn't do sharp. She did gradual. She did the slow simmer, the kind you didn't notice until something was already burning. "Dominique," she said, setting down her salad fork, "I keep meaning to ask, how is the design work going?" Every head at the table turned, just slightly. "It's going well," Dom said. "Busy lately, actually." Patricia tilted her head, a small, sympathetic smile. "That's good. That's good, that you have something to keep you occupied." Something to keep you occupied, like a crossword puzzle, like knitting. "It's more than that," Dom said pleasantly, "but thank you." "Of course," Patricia lifted her glass. "I just wonder sometimes, and I mean this kindly, whether a woman your age shouldn't be thinking about stability, something more solid. Design consulting isn't exactly a career, is it? More of a hobby that pays a little." Across the table, one of the aunts let out a small laugh, then covered it with her napkin. Marcus looked at his plate. Gerald stared into his wine. Julian said nothing. He moved a piece of lettuce with his fork. "I think it depends on your definition of solid," Dom said. Her voice was even, polite. "I'm comfortable with mine." Patricia smiled wider. She reached over and touched Sabrina's arm the same way she had at the door. Proprietary. Deliberate. "Sabrina is in commercial real estate," she said to the whole table, like an announcement. "Did everyone know that? Her family has been in the business for 30 years. She's actually building something." She paused. "There's something to be said for a woman who's really going somewhere." Sabrina looked down modestly, but Dom saw the corners of her mouth pull up, just slightly, before she smoothed it back into that careful, neutral expression. Julian reached for his water glass. Commercial real estate is great, Dom said. Congrats, Sabrina. Thank you, Sabrina said. Her voice was warm, practiced. Patricia was not done. You know what I always say, she continued, settling back in her chair with her wine. A man works hard his whole life. He deserves a partner who matches that, someone who brings something to the table. She glanced at Dom. Not just warmth and good intentions. Actual substance. The table was very quiet. Dom cut a piece of tomato and brought it to her mouth. Patricia kept going. Julian has always been an ambitious man, even as a boy. I used to tell Gerald, I said, that boy is going to need someone who can keep up. She smiled at Julian with something that looked like love, but had teeth in it. And I still believe that. Julian looked up once. His eyes met Dom's for just a second. Then he looked back down. You've raised a good man, Dom said simply. Something flickered across Patricia's face. She hadn't expected that. She'd expected hurt. She'd expected the chin to tremble, the eyes to go bright, some small crack to appear that she could press on. She got nothing, so she pushed harder. I only say it because I care. Patricia set her glass down with a small click. A wife should be an asset, Dominique, not, and I don't mean this unkindly, a liability. Julian has a certain image to maintain. His colleagues have expectations. The people in our circle have expectations. And a woman who can't quite— She waved a hand vaguely, up and down in Dom's direction. Keep pace with all of that. Well, it's not fair to him, is it? A man like Julian deserves someone who fits. The word fits landed in the room like something dropped from a height. Sabrina was looking at her wineglass, but her shoulders had straightened. Gerald coughed once. Marcus was deeply interested in his bread roll. Julian did not look up. Dom was quiet for a moment. She picked up her wineglass, took a long, slow sip, and set it back down on the tablecloth with perfect steadiness. Patricia, she said, thank you for dinner. It was a lovely meal. She folded her napkin once and set it beside her plate. She stood. She did not push her chair back too hard, and she did not look at Sabrina, and she did not look at Gerald, and she did not look at the aunt who had laughed. She looked only at Julian. He stood, slowly, eyes still low, like the floor might tell him what to do next. He followed her toward the door without a word, and Patricia watched them go with the quiet satisfaction of a woman who believed she had won something. The car was dark and quiet the whole way home. Julian drove with both hands on the wheel, which he only did when he was nervous. The city moved past the windows in streaks of orange light and wet pavement. It had rained while they were inside. Dom watched the road and said nothing. She counted 3 traffic lights before Julian finally spoke. I'm sorry about tonight. He exhaled through his nose. You know how she gets. Dom turned her head and looked at him. Really looked. The line of his jaw, the way he kept his eyes on the road like he was concentrating very hard on something that didn't require any concentration at all. Do I? She said. Not a question, just 2 words set down quietly between them. Julian's hands shifted on the wheel. She doesn't mean half of what she says. She has her opinions, and she says them, and it's not worth getting worked up over. I'm not worked up, Dom said. He glanced at her then, just a flicker, then back to the road. Right, I know. I just meant it was a lot tonight, and I'm sorry you had to sit through that. What part are you sorry about? Another glance, longer this time. Dom, Sabrina was there. She's a colleague. My mom invited her. I didn't know she was going to be there. Dom nodded slowly. She turned back to the window. Okay, she said. Julian seemed to want her to say more. She didn't. When they got home, she showered first, put on a clean t-shirt, and sat on the edge of the bed with her phone while Julian took his turn in the bathroom. She could hear the water running through the wall. She scrolled through nothing on her phone, not really reading anything, just holding it, a habit she had when she needed her hands to be doing something so the rest of her could stay still. By the time Julian came out, towel around his shoulders, hair damp, she had already turned off her bedside lamp and was lying on her side with her eyes closed. "You asleep?" he whispered. She kept her breathing steady. She heard him ease down onto his side of the mattress, heard him plug in his phone, heard the small, familiar sounds of him settling, one long exhale, a slight shift of weight, and then nothing. 12 minutes later, he was asleep. She knew the pattern of it, the exact rhythm of when he crossed over. Dom opened her eyes. She got up without a sound, bare feet on the hardwood, slow and careful past the bedroom door, down the short hall, into the second room they used as an office. She pulled a laptop from the bottom of the coat closet, from beneath an old winter jacket Julian had never bothered moving since they'd relocated it 3 years ago. He thought the shelf held nothing but scarves and a broken umbrella. She sat at the small desk, opened the laptop, and waited for the screen to load. The numbers she looked at first were the ones she knew by heart. The holding company, Carter Capital, registered under her maiden name, and the assets attached to it. 11 properties across the metro area, all acquired quietly over 6 years, managed through a property group that handled the day-to-day so her name never had to appear on anything visible. The building on Ashford Street, which she'd bought 4 years ago and had since tripled in value. The building on Monroe, where 3 of Julian's firm's biggest vendor contracts ran through. And the Callaway building on the east side, which housed, among other tenants, the Meridian Women's Club, Patricia's Club, where she had lunch every Thursday and her name was on the donor wall. Dom looked at those line items for a moment. Then she moved on. She opened the foundation records, the Carter Foundation. She funded arts programs in 4 cities, a scholarship track for first-generation college students, and 2 community health initiatives. None of it bore her face, just the name and the money behind it, doing its work quietly. Then she opened the portfolio summary. She scanned it in the way she always did, not with excitement, not with pride, just the clean, clear-eyed focus of someone checking the weather. After that, she opened the joint account, the one she and Julian shared for household expenses, groceries, utilities, the occasional dinner out. She rarely looked at it closely. She had her own money, and Julian paid the bills from his salary, and she had never felt the need to audit it. She looked at it now. The first transfer she almost scrolled past, $3,400, 6 weeks ago. She checked the destination account. The name attached was not a utility company, not a vendor, not anything she recognized. She checked the next one, $2,800, 5 weeks ago. Same account. $4,100, 3 weeks ago. Same account. She pulled up the account registration. It took her 4 minutes to find what she was looking for. The name on the account was S. Holt. Dom sat back in the chair. She looked at the ceiling once. Then she looked back at the screen. She did not feel the floor drop out from under her. She did not feel her throat close. What she felt was something more like the moment before a move in chess, a small, clean click inside her chest. Recognition. She closed the laptop. She picked up her phone, opened her messages with Tasha, typed 6 words. "I think it's time they meet me." She set the phone face down on the desk and went back to bed. She lay down beside Julian in the dark, pulled the sheet up to her shoulder, and closed her eyes. Her breathing was slow and even. She slept. Renata Voss kept her office on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown, the kind of place where everything was clean lines and quiet. No clutter, no art on the walls except one framed print near the window, a single black line on white paper that could have been anything, the kind of art that cost more than it looked like it should. Dom had always liked that about Renata. She didn't perform her success. She simply had it. "Portfolio review," Renata said, not looking up from the folder she was already flipping through when Dom walked in. Her reading glasses sat low on her nose. She was 53, with close-cropped silver hair and the precise movements of someone who had never once wasted a gesture in her life. "Routine," Dom said, setting her bag on the chair beside the desk. Renata looked up then. She studied Dom's face for exactly 2 seconds. Then she took off her glasses and set them on the desk. "Show me." Dom opened her laptop. She pulled up the joint account and turned the screen toward Renata without a word. Renata looked at the transfer log. She didn't react. Not a flinch, not a sharp breath. She just pulled the laptop a little closer and scrolled with 2 fingers, slow and methodical. 3 transfers, she said. 10,300 in 6 weeks. To an account registered to S. Holt. Sabrina Holt. Julian's co-worker, Dom said. Renata nodded once. She handed the laptop back and reached for her own keyboard. "Give me 20 minutes." Dom sat in the leather chair across from the desk, hands loose in her lap. Through the window behind Renata, the city was bright and sharp, the kind of clear morning that comes after a night of rain. She watched a plane move silently across the upper corner of the glass. Renata worked without talking. She made 2 phone calls, both brief, both in the clipped, specific language she used when she needed answers fast and didn't want to explain why. She typed in long stretches. She opened 3 tabs, cross-referenced 2 documents, printed 1 page, and then leaned back in her chair and looked at Dom. "It's not just an affair," Renata said. Dom waited. "The transfers are funding a capital contribution, partial investment stake." Renata slid the printed page across the desk. "Holt Family Properties is mid-acquisition on a commercial building. They're pulling in outside investors to close the gap in their financing. Julian has been moving money into Sabrina Holt's personal account, and that money is moving again, into a holding vehicle attached to the Holt family deal." Dom picked up the page and looked at it. The building address was printed near the top of the document. She recognized it immediately. "The Callaway Building," she said. "East Side, commercial mixed use, 11 tenants, including the Meridian Women's Club." Renata paused. "Patricia Reyes's club." "Yes." Renata looked at her for a moment. "Dom, your holding company owns that building. Has since 4 years ago. Under Carter Capital." "Under my maiden name," Dom said. "The Reyes family has no idea." Renata was quiet for a moment. It was the closest thing to surprise Dom had ever seen from her. A brief, still pause before she folded it away. "Holt Family Properties is trying to acquire an asset that you already own." "It appears so." Renata set her glasses back on her nose and looked at her screen again. "I've been hearing some noise for a few months about Patricia Reyes. Social circle talk, nothing concrete. She's been positioning this Holt connection as a financial opportunity for her family, not just a relationship." She clicked through 2 more screens. "From what I'm seeing, she's been pushing Julian toward this merger for over a year, framing it to him as securing the family's future. The Holts have real estate money. Julian has a salary and a mother who wants access to that money." "And a wife they think has neither," Dom said. "Exactly." Renata folded her hands on the desk. "They don't know what you're worth. They have no idea what's sitting under your maiden name. As far as the Reyes family is concerned, you're a design consultant with a modest income and whatever Julian earns." "That's what I've let them think." Neither of them said anything for a moment. Outside, the plane had disappeared behind a building. The office was very quiet. Dom set the printed page back on the desk, squarely, corners aligned. "I want to know everything," she said. "Sabrina's family, their real numbers, what they owe, what they're leveraged against, what this deal actually requires to close." She paused. "And the Reyes family, their actual financial standing. Not what Patricia tells people at her Thursday lunches. What's real." Renata reached for her notepad. "Before you decide your next move." "Before I decide anything," Dom said. Renata wrote 2 lines, capped her pen, and looked up. "How much time do I have?" Dom picked up her bag from the chair beside her. "Enough," she said. Tasha showed up with a brown paper bag in one hand and a folder tucked under her arm, wearing the expression she always wore when she'd been digging. Focused, a little pleased with herself and trying not to show it. "I brought the good stuff," she said, holding up the bag. "Jerk chicken from that place on Clement." Dom stepped aside to let her in. "When did you go all the way to Clement Street?" "When I had a lot to tell you and needed something to do with my hands." They ate at the kitchen counter, the folder sitting between them like a third person at the table. Tasha pulled it toward her after the first few minutes, licking her thumb before she flipped it open. "Okay," she said. "So, I called Auntie Brenda." Dom looked at her. "You called Auntie Brenda about my mother-in-law." "She's been in that same social world for 30 years. She knows every woman who ever sat on a committee in this city." Tasha turned the first page. "Turns out Patricia Reyes used to be a regular topic." "Past tense?" "Past tense. She's been quietly shrinking for a while." Tasha tapped the page. "But here's what started it. Gerald had an affair. A long time ago. Julian was maybe 5 or 6, with a younger woman. A colleague, from what Auntie Brenda heard. It wasn't a secret for long, but it also wasn't a real scandal because Gerald is the kind of man who makes everything seem boring, including his own mistakes. He came back, Patricia stayed, and everyone moved on." She paused. "Everyone except Patricia." Dom set down her fork. "She never got over it," Tasha said. "Not really. She stayed, but Auntie Brenda said she changed after that. Got harder. More careful about who was around Gerald, who was around her family. More focused on what things looked like from the outside." Tasha closed the folder for a moment. "And here's the part that matters. The woman Gerald was with was younger. Much younger. And pretty in that obvious way Patricia always described as unserious." Dom was quiet, thinking. "She's been afraid ever since," Tasha said. "Afraid of becoming the wife who gets set aside, the one who ages out while the husband upgrades." She opened the folder again. "And then Julian brings home a woman she can't quite read. Quiet, composed, doesn't talk about money, doesn't perform. Dom, she didn't hate you because you were beneath her. She was scared of you." "She disguised it well." "She always does. So she pushed it outward, made it your problem. Told herself that pushing Julian towards Sabrina was protecting the family, giving him something stable, something connected." Tasha's voice flattened. What she was really doing was making sure she got to choose, that nobody chose for her again. Dom reached over and pulled the folder toward herself. She looked at the notes inside, names, dates, a few printed text exchanges Tasha had gotten from sources Dom didn't ask about. "And Sabrina?" Dom asked. Tasha leaned back against the counter. "That part took me longer. She's polished, keeps it tight online, keeps it tight in person. But I know a woman who used to work at the Holt Properties offices. Admin, stayed about 2 years." Tasha crossed her arms. She said Sabrina was always the face, at every event, every presentation, every client dinner. Never the one who ran the numbers, never the one who sourced the deals, just the name, the daughter they could put in a room and trust to look the part. She grew up being used. She did, and she knows it, even if she won't say it. My source said Sabrina talked about wanting to do something on her own eventually, start her own branch of the company, something with her name on it that wasn't just inherited. Tasha shook her head. Never did it, though, because the name was comfortable, and she couldn't figure out who she was without it. Dom turned a page in the folder. There was a photograph Tasha had printed, Sabrina at some industry event, standing beside a Holt Properties banner, smiling for the camera. She looked confident. She looked like someone playing a part she'd rehearsed so many times she'd almost forgotten it wasn't real. "So this is what it is," Dom said. "Patricia repeating what was done to her. Sabrina hoping someone will finally see her as more than decoration. Julian letting all of it move around him without saying a word. And expecting you to disappear quietly so they can finish the deal." Dom looked at the photograph a moment longer. She understood it now, the full shape of it, the why underneath the cruelty. She could see how fear moved through people like water through a crack, spreading further than anyone intended, doing damage that looked personal, but was really just old damage finding a new place to land. She understood it. That was all. She closed the folder and set it aside. When she spoke, her voice was the same as it always was, even, unhurried, certain. "Knowing why they did it doesn't change what they did," she said. "It just means I see them more clearly." She looked at Tasha. All of them, including Sabrina. Tasha nodded once. She pulled the bag of food closer and started eating again. "Good," she said. "Then let's talk about what comes next." The Reyes house was quieter without Patricia in it. Gerald answered the door in a cardigan and reading glasses, a mug of something warm in his hand. He looked surprised, but not alarmed. That was the thing about Gerald. He never looked alarmed. He was the kind of man who would watch a building burn and describe it as an unfortunate situation. "Dominique," he said, "Patricia's out." "I know. I actually came to see you." Dom smiled, warm, uncomplicated, nothing behind it that he could find. "I had some questions about the social club. The lease comes up for renewal next quarter, and Patricia mentioned she's been worried about the terms. I thought maybe you could walk me through the setup." Gerald blinked at her for a moment, then stepped back from the door. "Sure," he said. "Come on in." He led her to the living room. Heavy furniture, framed family photos arranged too deliberately on the mantel, the kind of room that tried hard to say, "We have always been comfortable." Gerald settled into his usual chair and waved her toward the couch. Dom sat, folded her hands in her lap, and waited while he set down his mug. "So, the club lease," he said. "I don't know the specifics, honestly. Patricia handles all of that. But I think the issue is the rent went up last cycle and she doesn't love the new amount." He shrugged. "She's been saying the landlord is being difficult." "That happens," Dom said. "Do you know who manages the property?" "Some holding company. I couldn't tell you the name off the top of my head." He waved a hand. "Those things always hide behind 3 layers of LLCs. You know how it is." "I do," Dom said pleasantly. She let the silence sit for a moment, just long enough to feel comfortable, not long enough to feel pointed. Outside, a car passed. Gerald reached for his mug. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "After the other night?" Dom tilted her head slightly. "The dinner?" "Patricia can be—" He searched for the word and seemed to give up on finding a good one. "She has strong opinions about things. About the way she wants the family to look." "I understand," Dom said. Gerald nodded, relieved she'd made it easy for him. Men like Gerald always appreciated when someone made things easy. "She means well," he added. "I'm sure she does." Dom shifted slightly on the couch, keeping her voice light. "Julian seemed off that night too, though. He's been distracted for a while now. Stressed about work or, I don't know, something with the firm?" Gerald's expression moved, just slightly, a small tightening around the eyes that he covered fast with a sip of his drink. "You know how these deals get," he said. "When something big is in motion, there's a lot of pressure to keep the pieces in place." "Something big?" Dom kept her voice curious, interested, the way someone would be when they didn't already know the answer. Gerald set his mug down. He looked at her with the mildly unfocused gaze of a man who had spent decades gauging what a woman in the room was likely to understand. He'd looked at Dom and filed her under fine, but not a concern. She could see it. She had always been able to see it. "The Holt deal," he said, more openly now. "Sabrina's family. It's a real estate acquisition, big one. Julian has been working the relationship for months. Once it closes, it puts the family in a very different position financially." He paused. "We've had a rough few years, honestly. Between the firm's slow patch and some investments that didn't land the way I expected, This deal is the thing that straightens it out." "And you'd benefit from that too?" Dom asked. Gerald glanced at her and offered the kind of smile men give when they think they're being discreet. "I've got a small stake tied into it, yes. Nothing splashy. Just enough to make the retirement picture look better." He settled back in his chair. "It's close, Dom. Very close. Another few weeks and it should be done." "That's good timing," she said. "It is." He exhaled, comfortable now, moving into the part of the story he hadn't planned to tell, but couldn't quite help himself. "Julian's been putting off the family meeting because he wanted to wait until it closed. Get everything settled first, then deal with the personal side of things." He stopped, turned his mug on the table. "He just wants to do it the right way. He's not trying to hurt anybody." Dom looked at him steadily. "The personal side," she said, keeping her voice completely neutral. "You mean the divorce?" Gerald went very still. Then he looked down at his mug, and the silence that came out of him was the loudest thing in the room. He hadn't meant to confirm it, but he had, and they both knew it, and he had no graceful way backward. The color moved through his face in a slow, uneven wave. Not guilt exactly, more the look of a man who'd just realized too late that the woman sitting across from him had been paying closer attention than he'd given her credit for. Dom stood, smoothed the front of her coat, and picked up her bag. "Thank you, Gerald," she said. "This was really helpful." She smiled once more, the same warm, uncomplicated smile she'd walked in with, and let herself out. Renata's office was on the 14th floor of a building with no signage on the outside and no receptionist who smiled. The kind of place where serious things got done without any fanfare. The carpet was dark gray, the windows faced west. Everything here was chosen for function, not impression. Dom set her bag on the chair beside her and opened the folder she'd brought. Renata was already at her desk, reading glasses on, a second set of documents spread in front of her. She didn't look up right away. That was one of the things Dom had always appreciated about her. She finished what she was doing before she started something else. "Gerald confirmed a divorce is planned," Dom said. "He didn't mean to, but he did." Renata looked up then. "Filed when?" "He didn't give me an exact date, but he said the family meeting has been pushed back until the building deal closes." Dom sat down. "Julian wants to settle everything, his word, after the money lands." Renata pulled off her glasses and set them on the desk. "Then let's talk about the building." She slid a document across the desk, clean, official, a notarized filing with a date stamped in the upper right corner. Dom picked it up and looked at the date, even though she already knew what it said. Her holding company had owned the building for 6 years, long before Julian ever mentioned Sabrina Holt, long before Patricia started angling for a merger with a real estate family she'd barely known 2 years ago, long before anyone in the Reyes household decided that Dom was a problem to be managed and then quietly discarded. The building had been hers the entire time. "We can schedule the lease renewal decision for a specific date," Renata said. "Whenever you want it. We hold the decision, we hold the timeline. Patricia's club has been operating month to month since the last term expired. They've been waiting on us to extend, and they don't know that the us in question is you." Dom set the document back on the desk. "Set it for the same weekend as the family meeting." Renata wrote it down without comment. "What about Sabrina's family?" Dom asked. "That's the part I want you to hear carefully." Renata opened a second folder and turned it toward Dom. It was a scanned document, law firm letterhead, standard formatting, the language inside it careful and impersonal, the way legal language always was when it was trying to hide what it actually meant. Dom read it. It was a draft. Julian's name was at the top. Sabrina's family lawyer's firm was listed at the bottom. The filing date, written across the top of the first page, was exactly 1 week after the projected close date of the building acquisition. Julian hadn't been waiting to figure out what he wanted. He'd already decided. He'd already signed his name to it. He'd been sitting across from her at breakfast, coming home to their apartment, apologizing weakly for his mother's behavior at dinner, all while a lawyer 2 miles away held a document with his signature on it. Dom placed the document back on the desk. She didn't allow herself to sit with the feeling for long. There would be time for that later. Or there wouldn't. Either way, it didn't change what needed to happen next. "Tasha," Dom said. "Already on it?" "Not yet. I need her to move this week." Dom leaned back in her chair. "She has contacts close to Sabrina's family's business circle. I want her to start a small fire. Nothing traceable, nothing dramatic. Just enough doubt about Julian's financial situation to make them nervous. Let them wonder if the man they're about to merge their name with is actually standing on solid ground." Renata nodded slowly. "Carefully done. That could stall them without triggering a full withdrawal." "I don't want them to withdraw," Dom said. "Not yet. I want them scared and uncertain and asking questions they can't quite answer. I want them nervous enough to pay attention when the real information arrives." Renata made a note. The pen moved in clean, even lines. The rest of the hour was details: holding company documentation organized and certified, a record of every transfer from the joint account formatted for review, the lease renewal decision locked to a date and time that Dom controlled entirely. Each piece was placed where it needed to be, like objects set on a table before guests arrived. When they were done, Dom stood, straightened her coat, and reached for her bag. She thought about Patricia's dining room, the long table with the good china, the way Patricia had sat at the head of it like a woman presiding over something she owned, the way Julian had stared at his plate while his mother took Dom apart, word by word, in front of people who laughed or looked away. She picked up her phone and dialed. It rang twice. "Dominique?" Patricia's voice was cool and even, carrying that particular tone she reserved for Dom, pleasant enough on the surface, dismissive underneath. "Patricia," Dom said, "I think it's time we had that family meeting. This weekend, if you're available." A brief pause. "And I'd like Sabrina to be there." Patricia had set the table the same way she always did. Good china, the cream-colored plates with the gold rim, a low centerpiece of white flowers, fresh ones, not from a grocery store. The kind of table that said, "We have standards here." The kind of room that said, "Know your place before you sit down." Dom arrived last. She'd timed it that way. When she walked in, they were already seated. Julian at the side, shoulders slightly hunched, his hands around a glass of water he hadn't touched. Gerald at the far end, quiet as furniture. Patricia at the head, composed, wearing the dark green dress she saved for occasions she considered important. And Sabrina, seated across from Julian, her posture perfect, her expression arranged into something that looked like polite concern, but wasn't. Dom set her bag beside her chair and sat down. "Dominique," Patricia smiled, the kind of smile that came right before something sharp. "I'm glad you called this. I think it's past time we had a real conversation about the direction of things, about what's best for this family going forward." She let the word family sit in the air for a moment, deliberately, the way a person sets something down to make you notice it. "Julian has worked so hard," Patricia continued. "He's built something real, and we all want to see him in the right position to protect that." Her eyes moved briefly to Sabrina, then back to Dom. "Sometimes love isn't enough to sustain a life. Sometimes people grow in different directions. There's no shame in that." She said it gently. That was the cruelest part, the gentleness, like she was doing Dom a kindness. Julian looked at the centerpiece. Gerald looked at his hands. Sabrina looked at Dom with something just behind her eyes that wasn't quite a smile, but was close enough. Dom let the silence hold for 1 full second. Then she reached into her bag and placed a folder on the table. "I appreciate that, Patricia," she said. Her voice was even, unhurried. "I'd actually like to start with a piece of paperwork, if you don't mind." She opened the folder and slid the first document across the table toward the center, the notarized filing, the date stamp clear in the upper right corner. "The building that houses your social club," Dom said, "has been owned by my holding company for 6 years. Carter Holdings, LLC. You can see the filing date there." She tapped the corner of the page with one finger. Long before any of this conversation became necessary. Patricia looked at the document. Then she looked at Dom. Something moved across her face, not panic yet, but the first cold shadow of it. "That's," Julian started. "I'm not finished," Dom said, not unkindly, just clearly. She placed a second document on the table. "My company also holds the primary contract for the Meridian project, the commercial development your firm has spent the last 18 months building its reputation around, Julian." She looked at him directly. He looked back at her for the first time all evening. "Carter Holdings is the silent majority stakeholder. Your biggest client has been me." The room was very quiet. Dom reached into the folder again. "These are bank records." She laid them flat on the table. "Transfers from our joint account. 14 of them over 8 months, all going to the same account." She let a beat pass. "Sabrina's account." Sabrina's chin lifted, a reflex. "And this," Dom said, placing the last document on top of the rest, "is a draft of the divorce filing Julian prepared with your family's attorney." She looked at Sabrina as she said it, steady, without heat. "It was dated to be filed 1 week after the building deal was set to close, which means the plan was never to build a future together. The plan was to use the deal to get out clean and leave me with nothing." She folded her hands in front of her. Sabrina's expression had changed. The polish was still there, but underneath it, something had cracked. Her eyes moved from the documents to Julian, and whatever she was looking for on his face, she didn't find it. He was staring at the tablecloth. He had nothing to offer her. Gerald had gone the color of old chalk. His expected payout was in that folder too, documented in the financial trail Dom had let Renata trace all the way back. He knew it. She could see him knowing it. Patricia said nothing. Her hand rested on the table beside her plate, very still, the way a person holds themselves when they are trying not to show that the ground has moved. Dom looked around the table, at each of them, taking her time. "I came to this house a few weeks ago," she said, "and I sat at this table while you told the people in this room that I was replaceable, that I was a drain, that Julian deserved better." She paused. "I didn't argue with you then. I didn't need to." She straightened the folder once, just slightly, and left it where everyone could see it. "Now you know who I am," she said, "and I'd like to tell you what happens next." The lease renewal notice went out on a Tuesday. Dom didn't deliver it herself. She didn't need to. Renata's office sent the formal letter on Carter Holdings' letterhead, citing the expiration of the current term and the company's decision not to renew. The language was clean and professional. No emotion in it at all. Patricia received it on a Wednesday. Dom knew because Tasha called her that afternoon, barely holding back a laugh. "She called Diane Weston 3 times in 1 hour, Tasha said. Diane told someone, who told someone else, and now half the club thinks Patricia knew the building was being sold and didn't warn anybody." Dom was standing at her kitchen counter, reviewing a design brief. She set it down. "She didn't correct them?" Dom asked. "Would you?" Dom said nothing. That was answer enough. The club had met in that building for 11 years. It was where Patricia hosted her charity luncheons, where she introduced people to people, where she performed the version of herself she cared most about, the woman with connections, with standing, with a table worth sitting at. Without the space, the group would scatter. Some of them already were. A newer venue had come up in conversation, something farther from Patricia's neighborhood, something that didn't require her to organize. Nobody had asked Patricia to lead that conversation. That was the part that would stay with her, not the letter, the silence after it. The termination of the Meridian contract landed 2 days later. Carter Holdings withdrew its stake and formally ended its agreement with Julian's firm in a single, quiet document. No public statement, no explanation beyond standard contractual language about strategic realignment. But in a mid-tier architecture firm, you didn't need a public statement. The Meridian project had been the firm's flagship for a year and a half. Julian had been the lead on it. His name was attached to it in every internal presentation, every client update, every pitch they'd used to bring in 2 smaller follow-on contracts since. When the majority stakeholder walked away, the remaining funders got nervous. One of them called the firm's senior partner directly. By Friday, Julian had been quietly moved off the project. Dom heard about it from Renata, who heard about it from a contact in the firm's building management office, someone who had no idea about the larger picture and mentioned it the way people mention office gossip. Apparently the Reyes guy got pulled. Big deal, too. That's a rough week. It was. Renata filed the settlement paperwork on Thursday morning. It was thorough. The fund transfers were itemized, all 14 of them, with dates and amounts and the destination account, Sabrina's name printed clearly in the documentation. The settlement itself left Julian with his personal belongings, his car, and his salary. Nothing from the marriage. No claim on any asset tied to Carter Holdings, which Dom had held under her maiden name from the beginning. Legally, he had no ground to stand on. He'd signed the standard prenuptial agreement 4 years ago without reading it closely, trusting that Dom had nothing worth protecting. He'd been wrong about that. The transfer documentation reached Sabrina's family through their attorney, who had been quietly growing nervous ever since Tasha's contact had planted doubt about Julian's finances 2 weeks earlier. When the full picture arrived, the fraud, the instability, the paper trail of a man moving money to cover a deal that was already collapsing, Sabrina's father made the decision within the hour. The real estate deal was dead. Dom learned later, through Tasha, what had happened in the Holt family's conference room that afternoon. Sabrina's father had spread the documents across the table and asked his daughter one question. "Did you know about any of this?" She hadn't. That was the honest answer, and it didn't help her. Because what Sabrina's family saw wasn't just a bad deal. They saw their daughter's name attached to a man who had been stealing from his wife to fund a scheme that had now gone public in the worst way possible. They saw their real estate company's reputation brushing up against words like fraud and undisclosed transfers. They saw what it would look like if anyone connected the dots. Sabrina had walked into Patricia's dinner table thinking she was the prize. She had sat across from Dom and felt, for a brief and satisfying moment, like the obvious upgrade. Now she was sitting across from her father while he told her that the deal was finished, that Julian Reyes was finished, and that the family name was not going to be dragged through whatever came next. His tone wasn't angry. It was worse than angry. It was the voice of a man recalculating an asset. That was how Sabrina had always been treated by her own family, as an asset. She had spent years trying to become something more than that, proof of something. And she had chosen the wrong man, and the wrong scheme, and the wrong woman to underestimate. And now she was exactly where she'd started, a name on a letterhead. Nothing behind it that she'd built herself. Gerald's payout vanished with the deal. There was nothing to say about that. He had made his choices quietly, and he lost quietly. And that was the most Gerald thing possible. Julian called Dom on Saturday morning. She was in her kitchen when her phone lit up on the counter, his name on the screen. She looked at it for a moment. Then she picked up. "I think we need to talk," he said. Julian suggested a coffee shop downtown. Neutral ground, he'd said on the phone. Somewhere quiet. Dom arrived first. She always did. She chose a corner table, ordered a black coffee, and sat with her back to the wall. The place was warm and smelled like espresso and old wood. A soft hum of other people's conversations filled the air. She was calm. She had been calm for weeks now. Not the forced calm of someone holding something back. The real kind. The kind that comes after a decision has already been made and carried out and finished. Julian walked in 7 minutes late. He looked smaller than she remembered. Not physically. He was still tall, still put together in the way he always was. Nice coat, clean shoes. But something in his posture had gone soft. His eyes moved around the room before they found her, and when they did, he tried a small smile that didn't quite land. He sat down. ordered nothing. Dom. He said her name like it might fix something. She waited. I know how bad this looks, he started. I know what you found. I know what Renata filed. He folded his hands on the table. But I need you to understand. My mother pushed most of this. She got in my head. She's been in my head for years. The Sabrina thing, the deal, He stopped, shook his head. I was weak, I know that. But I never stopped caring about you. Dom picked up her coffee, took a slow sip, set it down. I believe you were weak, she said. He blinked. That wasn't what he expected. Julian. Her voice was even, no heat in it. Do you remember the dinner at your mother's house, 6 weeks ago? He looked down. Dom. She called my career a hobby. She implied you deserved better. She sat Sabrina across from me like a suggestion. Dom paused. And you stared at your plate. I know, I should have said something. You should have, Dom agreed. But you didn't. And that's the part I keep coming back to. Not the transfers, not the papers you drafted, not even Sabrina. She looked at him directly. You sat at that table and watched her do it, and you made a choice. You just didn't have the courage to tell me that was what you were doing. Julian's jaw tightened. She's my mother. She is, Dom said, and I was your wife. The word was settled between them like something solid. He tried again. His voice dropped lower, more careful. We could rebuild this. I know that sounds impossible right now, but I know you. I know how you think. You're not someone who just... Julian. She said his name once, quiet and clean, and he stopped. I'm not angry anymore. I want you to know that. I'm not sitting here wanting you to hurt. She folded her hands around her cup. But I'm not coming back to a marriage where I had to hide who I was just to survive it. And I'm not forgiving silence dressed up as helplessness. He looked at her for a long moment. Something moved across his face. Not quite grief, not quite shame. Something in between that he would have to carry himself. Dom stood. She left 2 20s on the table, more than enough for both of them. Take care of yourself, she said. And she meant it. The way you mean something when you've already let it go. Then she walked out into the cool morning air, and she didn't look back. A year later, the building on Mercer Street had a new sign above its entrance. Carter Community Foundation. Clean letters. Her name. Her work. The renovation had taken 9 months. Dom had overseen most of it herself, walking the floors on weekends with a hard hat and a cup of coffee, watching the old bones of the place become something new. The ground floor had been converted into a community workspace. The upper floors housed 3 nonprofits she'd helped fund for years in private, finally operating in the open with the resources they'd always deserved. Renata had handled the legal work, same as always. Tasha had unofficially managed the contractors, same as always. Julian was working at a smaller firm now, a step-down position, managing documentation rather than leading design. His name no longer appeared in presentations. People in his old circle knew why. Not all the details, but enough. He and Patricia rarely spoke. She had relocated her social gatherings to her own living room, which only held a fraction of the people who used to come, and they came less often now. The group had quietly reorganized itself around someone else. Gerald stayed home and said very little, same as always. Sabrina was spotted at a smaller industry mixer that fall, polished, composed, smiling at the right moments, still trading on the Holt name, still attaching herself to conversations she hadn't started and deals she hadn't made, still waiting for someone to hand her the thing she'd never learned to build. On a Friday evening in November, Dom sat at the head of a long table in the building's new dining room. Tasha was to her left, laughing at something. Renata was across from her, wine in hand, finishing a story. 4 other women filled the remaining seats. Colleagues, friends, people who knew exactly who Dom was and had known for years. The food was good. The conversation was better. Dom looked down the length of the table, in her building, in her life, and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Full. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day.